The most exciting quarterback competition in the NFL just got that much more interesting. Over the past few weeks, both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson have been training with their new team in Pittsburgh. You see, after going 10-7, finishing third in arguably the most difficult division in all of football, and getting blown out by the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen in the wildcard game, they decided to get rid of their entire quarterback room. That means Kenny Pickett, who was a first-round pick for them only 2 years ago, out the door, traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. Mitchell Trubisky, released, and Mason Rudolph, well, they let him walk in free agency. And with no other quarterback on the roster for the upcoming season, that's where Justin Fields and Russell Wilson come in. You see, Russell Wilson ended up signing to the Steelers for about 1 year, $1.2 million, the league minimum. He will be making less than what Kenny Pickett made. Why? Well, because the Denver Broncos still owe him $37 million. That's what happens when you release a guy who was given a guaranteed contract. Russell Wilson still needs to be paid out by the Broncos, so he took an extremely cheap deal to play for the Steelers, who are going to be a playoff contender. I know their division is tough, but with Mike Tomlin, they're bound to finish above 500. And as for Justin Fields, well, he comes to the team from the Chicago Bears for a little higher of a price, as the Steelers did have to trade a 2025 6th-round pick to the Bears, that could eventually become a 4th-round pick depending on playing time. But basically, the Steelers walked out of free agency with 2 starting caliber quarterbacks, which is far better than what the Raiders could say. I mean, the Raiders missed out on everybody in free agency, and then the draft came around, and they weren't able to land a single quarterback there. So they're stuck riding with Aiden O'Connell for an extra season, but that's besides the point. We're here to talk about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson battling it out for QB1. And on both sides, we have quarterbacks who have been coming off some pretty lackluster seasons as of late. I mean, Justin Fields had struggled in Chicago since he had got there and didn't see some real improvement over these last 3 years. And ever since Russell Wilson left Seattle, well, he hasn't looked like the guy who would lead them to a Super Bowl, was in All-Pro talks, and won Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl. We are not seeing prime Russell Wilson anymore. At least we didn't see that in Denver. And Justin Fields has yet to take that year 3 leap, and we're in year 4 now. So eventually he's got to get some improvement, or he will just be a backup quarterback for the rest of his career. But anyway, I just wanted to remind you guys to slow down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers, and every subscription is greatly appreciated. Alright, now let's get back to talking about this competition. You see, like I was mentioning earlier, Justin Fields has been on the Bears since 2021, where he was drafted with the 11th overall pick. And to be fair to Fields, he wasn't thrown into the best scenario. But when is that ever the case for a rookie quarterback? You see, the Bears were recovering from a failed Mitchell Trubisky era, and the front office was on the way out. The GM, the head coach, were on the verge of getting fired and losing their jobs. Hell, the entire staff were on the verge of losing their jobs if Fields didn't succeed. And in his rookie year, he went 2-8 in the games he played. I mean, the team was terrible around him. He only threw for 7 touchdowns, had, I want to say, 1,800 passing yards, which is terrible for a quarterback who's playing 12 games and starting 10 of them. And, his completion percentage sat at about 58%. But where Justin Fields showed the most promise his rookie year was on the ground. And I know he's a quarterback, but you can't ignore his rushing stats, because in his rookie year, he rushed for 420 yards, had 2 rushing touchdowns, and the longest one he pulled off was 23 yards. And his rushing game would improve over these next couple of seasons, and that's when you see Pittsburgh potentially talking about him being their kick returner, especially with these new rules. But anyway, I really want to highlight his second year, because that's where we see the most improvement. I mean, on the ground especially. He played 15 games for the Bears, and in those 15 games, rushed over 1,000 yards, 1,143 to be exact, had 8 rushing touchdowns, his longest being for 65 yards, and then in the air, 2,000 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and 60% completion rating. He was, ranked 9th in MVP voting that year. Of course, was he ever going to get it? No, because as the starting quarterback, the team went 3-12 under him. So, you're not going to be winning no MVP with a 3-12 record as the quarterback. And last but not least, we have his most recent year in Chicago, which was as turbulent as ever. I mean, he played 13 games, was injured for a good portion, only had 16 throwing touchdowns, and his interceptions did go to a career low 9, but that's not really saying much when, again, the team performed 5-8 under him. They missed the playoffs and are 4th in their division, which is why after 3 seasons and landing the first overall pick, due to a trade they had made the year prior with Carolina, well, Caleb Williams was an option, so of course they're going to decline Justin Fields. They don't want to keep him on the roster. Might as well get him out of there while he still has some sort of value and just run it with Caleb Williams, which is exactly what happened. But enough about Fields. Let's get to Russell Wilson's side of the story. You see, the thing with Russell Wilson is that he's gone through 3 different head coaches over the last 3 years. 2 of them being in his 2 years at Denver. You see, in his first year with Denver, well, it didn't go exactly as Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson had in mind. Why? Because Russell Wilson ended up finishing with a career low 16 touchdowns in a season. And when you're not producing on offense, you're not going to win. Which is why in 15 games started for the team, they went 4-11, another career low for Russell Wilson. Of course, he did have about 3,500 passing yards, but 60% completion percentage. Can you guess? Another career low for Russell Wilson. 2022 was abysmal. He was 34 years old. It looked like his career was just about over in 2022. And then 2023 rolls around. What do the Denver Broncos have in mind for Russ? Well, they decide to bring in Sean Payton, who had took a couple years off after choosing to retire from the Saints. But really, I think he was just trying to get out of there since Drew Brees had retired and the salary cap issue in New Orleans was going to get miserable. So I think that's honest to God what had happened. And in 2023 with Sean Payton, you know, the offseason was kind of terrible. I mean, Sean Payton spent the entire July, August, September just calling out Russell Wilson, thinking that would help. But Russell Wilson doesn't respond to that kind of coaching, which is why under him, you know, the team struggled. He threw for 3,000 passing yards. He had, I want to say, 26 touchdowns. He did improve offensively. It was actually kind of a comeback year for Russ. Could have been considered in comeback player of the year voting if Joe Flacco didn't return from the depths of the deep or whatever. But anyway, the team went 7-8 under Russ, barely missed the playoffs. Hell, they chose to miss the playoffs by not starting Russell Wilson in a couple of the games towards the end of the year. And then, you know, he only had 8 interceptions. It wasn't the worst year, especially statistically for Russ. However, if you actually watch the games, well, he didn't look at his best. He wasn't thriving. The defense was terrible. I'm pretty sure the Dolphins scored 70 points on the Broncos defense, so they were no help for Russell Wilson as he was trying to make a playoff push in Denver, which is why after 2 failed seasons, he now sees himself on his 3rd team in his career. It sucks what happened in Seattle and how it just kind of fell apart with Pete Carroll, his relationship, and then struggling in Denver for 2 years. However, I do think a change of scenery is exactly what Russell Wilson needs and why he will find success again. You see, we only have to go back about 3-4 years to see why we should believe in Russell Wilson, because in 2020 with Seattle, he threw for 40 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 68% completion percentage, 4,200 yards, and was a Pro Bowler, an absolute baller, played 16 games. Heck, the one thing about Russell Wilson is that he will always be there for you. He has been in the NFL for over a decade, and the least amount of games he's ever started in a season, 14. Why? Because he's Mr. Dependable, Mr. Unlimited, the friendly face you see in the Subway commercials. Now, as for the quarterback competition in Pittsburgh, I do have Russell Wilson winning it, barring any injuries, and as long as he is there for the Steelers, I do believe that he will take them to the playoffs, and Justin Fields is just going to have to sit behind him. Now, Justin Fields doesn't have a contract for the upcoming season, so if he doesn't play, well, that just means he might be looking at a 3rd team in 3 years. But if he does get given his opportunity and Russell Wilson gets pulled out for whatever reason, Justin Fields has the skill set capable enough to win over a job and look fabulous in the right system. Especially with a head coach like Mike Tomlin, anything's possible. But anyway, that's about it for this video.